All in all, ladies, it seems we need someone to take a business trip. One person will suffice. So, who's up for the journey?" A man, sitting in an impressive leather armchair, addressed the 3 female employees in front of him. "Based on my initial calculations, the business trip should take about a week. You should leave on Sunday to arrive by Monday, ready to start work." The office was silent, with only a tune from the radio playing in the background. "So, any volunteers? Lucy, how about you?"
"Mr. Rudolph, I can't," replied the brunette with the stylish haircut. "My son's birthday is next week. He's turning 10. I'd like to celebrate with him, so I can't go."
"All right, that's a valid reason. Megan, are you up for it?"
The pretty blonde shook her head, causing her luxurious curls to bounce. "Why complicate things? Mary is from that city. Let her go. I think that's a great idea." Another blonde, this one with straight hair, agreed. "Exactly, Mr. Rudolph. Megan's suggestion makes sense. Who better than Mary to go? She can mix business with the pleasure of nostalgia and catching up with relatives." The man nodded.
"Right, then all that's left to do is notify Mary. By the way, why isn't she at the meeting?"
Quick thinking, Megan stood up for her colleague. "You sent her to the supplier to negotiate a few points in the contract's annex. She'll probably be here soon." Sure enough, as soon as Megan finished speaking, there was a knock at the door, and a woman with ruddy brown skin and long hair, gathered in a high ponytail, entered the office. She sat down at the table with her colleagues, handed the chief a folder with documents, and explained, "Sorry for being late. I got caught in a traffic jam." The boss nodded approvingly after reviewing the documents. Without preamble, he announced,
"Mary, prepare for a trip. You have a business trip to your hometown for about a week. Any objections?"
Mary shrugged her shoulders and said, "If it's necessary, it's necessary." She began to clarify the tasks for the upcoming business trip, and Mr. Rudolph, having dismissed the other women to their workplaces, detailed the trip's specifics to her. Mary knew that her jealous husband Zach wouldn't be pleased about her week-long absence on a business trip. The upcoming trip to the city, where she spent her childhood and youth, stirred mixed feelings within her. While she looked forward to seeing her relatives, she also dreaded the potential for a painful encounter. In her hometown, Mary had suffered a significant disappointment because her first love hadn't resulted in happiness. His name was Bob Jeffries. He was her classmate, and they spent the last year of study dancing slow dances at school discos and strolling around the city under the enchanting twilight. From a girl smitten with love, Bob was more handsome than all the popular musicians in the world. With his short haircut, broad shoulders, sharply defined cheekbones, and a massive chin, he was very handsome and manly. His dark brown eyes seemed to gaze directly into her heart, easily discerning Mary's feelings of love. The girl had fantasized that Bob was the love of her life, and they would always be together. However, the guy was looking for a better option and found one effortlessly. He didn't even have to go far. He chose Kate Lampkus, an unpleasant, arrogant girl who always smelled of particularly strong perfume. To her classmates, Kate boasted that her perfume was an original Chanel, allegedly purchased in Paris during a trip with her parents on her 16th birthday. Mary found out almost immediately that Bob was dating Kate. She smelled the unfamiliar perfume on his denim jacket from several meters away, prompting her to ask him directly, "What's going on?" Bob admitted honestly to having a sort of romance with Kate Lapkus, but also expressed his desire to continue meeting Mary secretly. Mary refused, and then she found out that Kate's father, a local businessman, had hired Bob to his company. It was clear to Mary that her lover had sold himself out, and for a substantial price by their local standards. What hurt her most was Bob's cynicism. He did not switch partners out of love, but for selfish reasons, and he wanted to keep Mary around for his amusement. The pain of betrayal was too intense for her to bear, so she decided to distance herself from the self-serving Bob. Masking her feelings, she told her parents that she wanted to try her luck in the capital. They discouraged her, warning her about the dangers and complexities of a big city. But surprisingly, everything turned out quite well. The provincial, as it sometimes happens, was just lucky. She found a job and met a man who could melt the ice in her heart. Zack was 7 years older than Mary, had already graduated from university, and held a normal position in a large concern. Their paths crossed when Zack took refuge in the coffee shop from a sudden downpour. While waiting for the rain to stop, he had the time to appreciate the young barista's attractiveness and good nature. She was welcoming to every visitor of the coffee shop. Moreover, she spoke correctly, a trait that Zack's mother Denise always said was a sign of good manners. After the rain had left the sidewalks shiny and full of puddles, Zack, ready to leave, asked the beautiful barista for her phone number. For their first date, Zack quickly swept the provincial girl into a whirlwind of courtship. His sincerity dispelled any lingering doubts in her mind. It was Zack who convinced her to leave the coffee shop and take an office job at his former classmate's company. This classmate had become the boss due to his familial ties with the general director. Jokingly, Zack explained, "Ben Rudolph and I are good friends. I trust him completely. He will look after you and won't let anyone offend you. That way, I can be sure you will avoid any workplace shenanigans and romances." Surprisingly, Zack quickly introduced Mary to his mother. Denise accepted her warmly, and the fact that Mary was a newcomer and only had a school education didn't bother her. She hadn't expected Mary to captivate her hard-to-please son to the point of marriage, but that's precisely what happened. Denise knew better than to dissuade her son, as it could severely damage their relationship. Mary's parents were very fond of their son-in-law, and Mary herself was blissfully happy. Life in the capital brought her love and work effortlessly. It seemed almost magical. Living with her mother-in-law in the same apartment could have been a challenge for some, but not for Mary. She was confident she could get along with anyone for the sake of her husband, especially since Denise had always been reasonable and sensible. The couple decided to focus on savings for a mortgage down payment and investing a little in the renovation of Denise's apartment. Contrary to popular prejudices, the two housewives, a mother-in-law and daughter-in-law, peacefully shared the same kitchen, without any squabbles or discontent. Hearing her colleagues complain about their in-laws, Mary quietly rejoiced in her good fortune. Everyone was satisfied, especially Zack, as his mother and wife didn't compete for his attention, creating a cozy and pleasant atmosphere in their apartment. When, during the dinner, Mary informed Zack that she would be going on a week-long business trip, he got visibly upset and exclaimed, "Why on earth did your boss decide to send you? Aren't there any other employees? He knows my stance on your travels." Mary attempted to soothe her husband, saying, "Zack, who else but me can go to my hometown? I won't even need to rent a hotel. My parents will be happy to host me. So don't worry. Understand that I can't take advantage of the fact that my immediate superior is your friend to avoid travel for work matters. Besides, don't you trust me?" Zack remained stoic. He understood that his wife's work trip did not pose a threat to their marriage, but despite many years of marriage, he disliked the idea of a long separation. He admitted, "No, it's not that. I trust you, and I understand that meeting your parents is a great bonus of this trip. It's just that I'm going to miss you." Denise, who had lately been arriving home from work much later than the young people, as she referred to her son and daughter-in-law, walked in on a peaceful scene in the kitchen. Mary and Zack sat on the sofa arm in arm. The elderly Tom, the cat, was snoozing next to them, well fed and content with his life. Mary noticed her mother-in-law and began setting the table for her. "Zack and I have already eaten. I'll set the table for you now, and then we can all have tea together." Zack's mother gently patted her sleeping pet, who murmured worriedly. After washing her hands and changing her clothes, she joined them at the table. Denise ate her dinner happily, merely nodding when she heard that her daughter-in-law would soon be going on a business trip. Although the woman at first glance behaved as usual, Mary noticed that mentally she was somewhere far away, and did not even reproach the cat for his laziness and ignoring her appearance in the apartment. However, there was no time to think about it too closely. It was necessary to get ready for the road. As she saw Mary off, Denise sent verbal greetings to her parents and seemed to behave as usual. This reassured Mary, who dismissed her earlier thoughts about her mother-in-law's strange behaviour. Her focus shifted to her upcoming trip back home. At the airport, Mary was met with the usual bustle. Ignoring the insistent taxi drivers preying on tired and hurried travellers, she made her way to the bus stop. Mary didn't let her parents know about her arrival to avoid causing unnecessary fuss. She knew that otherwise her mother would have prepared a feast fit for a wedding. Each time she approached her home, an inexplicable feeling overwhelmed her. Her anticipation of a joyful reunion was tangled with both happy and sad memories, causing her heart to beat a little faster. Seeing the kitchen light on, she knew her family was home. She unlocked the door to her parents' apartment and announced loudly, "Hello, everyone." Her parents were thrilled with their daughter's surprise visit, but a situation cast a shadow over their reunion. The mother confessed, "Mary, we made reservations at the sanatorium for Wednesday. It was a last-minute trip and we didn't expect you to visit." She paused, then turned to her husband. "Should we give our spot to someone else?" "No, Mum," Mary protested. "Don't change your plans on my account. I'll be travelling for work and will likely only be home for the night. Don't worry, we'll have enough time to catch up. It's fine." Her mother gave her a tight hug and whispered, "All right, dear. Let's believe that everything happens for the best." Mary's business trip was far from a vacation. As expected, every day she left home in the morning and didn't return until the evening. However, on the day of her parents' departure, she altered her busy schedule and escorted her parents to the train station. After bidding them farewell, she then attended to her work commitments. Consequently, her day was hectic, and by evening she was totally worn out. As she neared her house, all she could think about was relaxing in a foamy bath. Suddenly a familiar voice called out to her. Mary turned around, more irritated than surprised, and greeted Bob. The grown-up classmate showered her with compliments. "Mary, I'm impressed. You've become even more refined. You were beautiful before, but now you're top-notch. The capital has influenced you. You're so stylish now." While the man who had once broken her heart, but who had unwittingly helped her find happiness, was spewing flattering phrases, Mary studied him carefully. Surprisingly, time had been kind to him. Bob Jeffries seemed more masculine, and his self-assuredness and apparent wealth made him irresistible, at least in his own eyes. "Well, Mary, why are you silent? Aren't you happy to see me?" he asked. "Listen, Kate is staying with our children at her parents' house tonight. By the way, you probably don't know, but we have a 2-year-old son and a daughter who was born 3 months ago." "Congratulations," Mary responded flatly, not particularly interested in his life. Bob, undeterred, pressed on. "Listen, Mary, how about going to my place? We could celebrate our meeting, chat, and reminisce about our past. Remember our romance, how we used to walk hand in hand, dreaming of the future. Could we pick up where we left off?
I heard you married a guy from the capital. Good for you. However, why are you here alone? Is your husband too busy earning money to spend time with you? I can make everything better." Mary was deeply disgusted, almost to the point of nausea. The last thing she wanted was to interact with Bob. Without any pretense of politeness, she dismissively sent her former boyfriend away. "Go to your place alone. Go, and don't look back," Mary said, and turning sharply, walked towards the entrance. "You're too arrogant," a scornful phrase followed her. But Mary had no intention of reacting to his insult. Let Bob say what he wanted. Neither his words nor his once impressive appearance held any power over her now. They no longer stirred any nostalgia or bitterness. It was wonderfully liberating to finally let go of her resentment towards the past. After rewarding herself with a relaxing bath, Mary felt invigorated. Her work was progressing better than expected, and there was hope of finishing her business trip ahead of schedule. She missed her husband deeply. Moreover, there was nothing or no one in her hometown that could compel her to stay. And indeed, everything was finished before the plan, and by Thursday afternoon, Mary had already booked tickets for the next train to the capital. She tidied up her parents' apartment and set off home. When she got home late that night, she was surprised, for the apartment was empty, except for the furry Tom. It appeared that both Zack and Denise were held up at work, leaving the pet hungry. "What, Tom, have you not eaten for a while?" Mary asked with a smile, not expecting an answer. However, the cat seemed to understand her, responding with a long meow. Looking back at Mary, it continued towards the kitchen. Mary fed the tail extortionist, refreshed his water, and noticed the overflowing trash can, which emitted unpleasant odours. She carefully took out the bag and went to the trash cans in the yard. The lantern's light was enough to prevent her from stumbling, guiding her to her destination. As she prepared to dispose of the garbage, she heard voices from behind the metal sheet, separating the containers from the pavement. One voice was unmistakably familiar to Mary. She listened more intently and recognized it as her mother-in-law's, who was unaware of her presence just 7 meters away. It was a rather unexpected situation. Mary intended to slip away unnoticed when suddenly she heard her name mentioned. Overcome with curiosity, she decided to stay put. Despite chastising herself for it, it became clear that what Denise was discussing was not intended for her ears. "Mary's away on a business trip, but judging by the light in the windows, my son must be home. Otherwise, I would have invited you in," she heard her mother-in-law say. A deep, unfamiliar male voice responded in a flattering tone. "Darling, you realize that at our age, hiding in various rented places isn't a viable option, let alone hygienic. I wish you nothing but the best, and I'm so embarrassed that I can't offer you my own apartment. After my divorce, I left everything to my wife and son, and now I feel bad for taking you, the woman I love, to all sorts of rented apartments. I feel incredibly guilty, but you know, I care for you so much. It's more than love. It's adoration. You are like a goddess to me, a true blessing from fate that I don't deserve." There was a brief silence, broken only by the sound of a kiss. Mary stood still, too scared to move, until she heard Denise's timid response. "I understand everything, Joshua, and I appreciate your feelings for me, but what can I do? I can't evict my son and daughter-in-law, who is like a daughter to me, and leave them homeless. They are saving money to buy a house, and, moreover, they completely renovated my apartment with their own money. How can I kick them out?" Once again, the male voice rumbled. Persuasive, resolute, and insistently. He said, "My dear Denise, what this provincial weasel and your son have done is simply their duty. They were trying for the most part for their own comfort. Your Zack is a grown man, married, and it's time he sorted out his housing situation himself. You've given him everything you could. You just need to show him and his wife the door. There's no need to wait for a suitable occasion to put this matter off. Act fast. When your cunning provincial daughter-in-law has a baby, your apartment won't be valued highly on the market with a minor tenant. You'll need to sell it at a substantial discount, losing a considerable amount of money. And for what? Out of pity for your son and daughter-in-law? You should pity yourself first. We could be sitting on the sofa in your cosy living room, discussing paintings or movies, but instead we're like teenagers hanging around on the streets and sleeping on other people's pillows. I'm fed up with this instability."
Denise timidly objected.
"Joshua, you have repeatedly suggested that I free the apartment from Mary and Zack. I can't imagine how to do that. If I ask my son to move, he'll be upset. Should I stir up a scandal so that my daughter-in-law leaves with her husband? It's odd. She's done nothing wrong. In fact, Mary is tidy, cooks well and never causes trouble. We haven't even had a single argument in all 3 years."
The invisible interlocutors fell silent. Fearing that now they would go in the direction of the house, Mary quietly, so as not to give away her presence, and without throwing away the garbage bag, hurried back home. She needed to reach home before her mother-in-law and keep her eavesdropping a secret. Running as fast as she could, she reached the bushes that concealed her route to the entry door. Inside the apartment, she put the unpleasant-smelling bag on the balcony, sighed, and remembered her grandmother's old saying, "Nothing should be thrown out in the evening." Yet one could argue that if she hadn't tried to get rid of the source of the foul smell, she wouldn't have overheard the peculiar conversation. Mary was intrigued by the conversation between her mother-in-law and a stranger named Joshua, not because she feared leaving their comfortable apartment for rented accommodation, but due to the hint of insincerity in Joshua's voice. She knew she must tread carefully to avoid offending Denise. Mary had just finished unpacking when the lady of the house came into the apartment. "Mary, have you been here long?" she exclaimed, surprised. "No, Denise. I arrived about 10 minutes ago. I managed to finish my chores early. My parents are in a sanatorium, so I hurried back. I missed you and Zack," replied Mary. Denise warmly smiled at Mary and said, "That's good. Zack should arrive soon. He's been swamped at work all week. You must be hungry from the trip. Why don't you have something to eat?" Mary declined, saying, "No, thank you. I'll take a shower and freshen up. We can dine together when Zack returns." The mother-in-law responded with a nod and a half-smile. Mary was puzzled. Was it possible that this woman could pretend so well that she showed no sign of her discontent or thoughts about separating from her son's family? Or was Mary too oblivious to her mother-in-law's emotions that she missed all the signs? After all, Denise's affair with Joshua hadn't started yesterday. He was already giving advice on how she should handle her property. Mary regretted eavesdropping on the conversation. If she hadn't, everything would have remained normal. Now she had to subtly convince her husband to consider moving to a rental, or better yet, buying their apartment via a mortgage finally. The morning didn't clarify how she should proceed. Despite the opportunity to rest for another day, she chose to go to work, hoping it would distract her from her troubling thoughts. Mr. Rudolph greeted her warmly, while her colleagues expressed surprise that she didn't extend her weekend. It did not even occur to her to open up. But not because Lucy, Megan and Holly were bad, jealous or stupid. It was just that the relationship between the colleagues did not go beyond working cooperation. They would chat during lunch and occasionally go shopping or to the theatre after work, but they respected each other's personal boundaries. Barely waiting for the end of the working day, as agreed, she met with her husband to reward each other for the separation with joint entertainment. After the movie, she initiated a carefully planned conversation. "Zack, isn't it time for us to get our own place?" Mary asked. Zack was visibly surprised. "Why would you say that, Mary? Are we not living well with my mum? I've never noticed any disagreements. Why should we move all of a sudden?" Mary, embarrassed to admit that she had overheard a conversation of her mother-in-law, tried to justify herself. "You're right, we don't have any misunderstandings. But your mum is still young. She's almost 55, which isn't considered prime age these days. Denise is a real beauty and looks youthful. Maybe she has plans for her personal life, and we might get in her way." Zack laughed. "My mum is indeed beautiful and looks great. But trust me, after my father left to pursue happiness with another woman, his so-called new love, she sees all men as betrayers. I've occasionally reminded her that she's a vibrant woman deserving love, but she outright rejects this, calling it nonsense. So, we're not in her way at all. Who knows, she might even struggle being alone." Mary agreed that it wasn't quite right to divulge his mother-in-law's personal secrets, even to her son. If Denise was serious about Joshua, it was her right to introduce him to the family. Fortunately, she didn't need to keep her mother-in-law's secret for long. Less than a week later, a flustered Denise announced, "I have a surprise for you. This weekend, a man I'm seeing romantically is coming to visit. I hope you can welcome him warmly. He's already nervous enough about meeting you." Caught off guard by the news, Zack fell silent. Seeing that her mother-in-law was expecting some form of support, Mary reassured her. "Denise, don't worry. We will meet your guest with open arms. Right, Zack?" The stunned man nodded in agreement. "I'll help you prepare the treats, of course. Let's just decide what will be on the table, shall we?" the daughter-in-law continued. By the time the guest was expected to arrive, everything was ready. The table was laid out according to all the rules of hospitality. As the time for Denise's beloved to meet her son and his wife drew nearer, she became increasingly anxious. The unyielding minute hand on the kitchen clock seemed to mock her, moving forward, while their guest was yet to arrive. At his mother's request, Zack even went down to the entrance to check if the intercom was working. After confirming that it was, he tried to reassure her. There must be traffic jams on the road. Nervously, Denise attempted to call the man she was waiting for, but to no avail. The answering machine informed her that Joshua's phone was either turned off or out of reach. Mary struggled to find comforting words for her distressed mother-in-law, who was absent-mindedly folding paper napkins into origami. When Denise's smartphone chimed with a melodious ringtone, she hastily picked up and asked, "Hello, is that you, Joshua? What's the matter? Where are you?" Mary tactfully retreated to the other room, where her husband was engrossed in a computer game, and quietly told him, "It seems that our guest is finally founded, but he didn't show up in person, and instead called your mum." Zack merely shrugged, replying, "Well, I did tell you, he's probably stuck in traffic somewhere." A few minutes later, a distraught Denise entered her son and daughter-in-law's room. "Joshua was attacked while walking towards us. Someone hit him from behind and robbed him. He was unconscious for a bit, but managed to ask a store employee to use their phone. Luckily, Joshua has an incredible memory and knew my number by heart. He's at the emergency room now. I asked him to come here then, and he initially refused, but I insisted. Why should he endure this alone and keep replaying the attack in his mind? It's better for him to be with us, right?" "Of course," replied Zack, and suggested, "Listen, Mum, why don't I go and pick Joshua up from the hospital? That way we can ensure he gets here safely without any more incidents." Denise smiled. "Son, I knew I raised you to be kind and considerate, but I've already called a cab for Joshua on my smartphone. The car is on its way." Soon the doorbell rang. Joshua appeared at the doorstep, looking less than ideal. His light beige suit was covered in dust and sweat stains, and there was a fresh abrasion on his cheek. Joshua smiled apologetically at Zack, who answered the door and introduced himself. "My name is Joshua Bell. You must be Zack, right? You look so much like your mother. In fact, you two could be mistaken for siblings, given how stunningly beautiful Denise is. It's unfortunate that our long-awaited meeting has to be under such circumstances, but I couldn't do anything about the unexpected attack from behind." Denise joined the two men and began to fuss over her guest. "Oh, Joshua, come in. You've had such a hard time. Zack, please bring some of your things. Let Joshua change his clothes." To Mary's surprise, the man whose conversation she had heard at the dumpster was quite confident when he appeared in the hallway. He greeted her warmly, saying it was a pleasure to meet her. He thanked Zack for the things he had brought and went to the bathroom to change and tidy up. It seemed that the recent incident hadn't affected Joshua's mood at all. Zack asked the man how he planned to find his attackers. "I probably won't report to the police," the man said. "I used to work in law enforcement, and I know that pursuing this legally would be futile. I still have some connections, so I'll handle this myself. It'll be faster and more effective." Once everyone gathered around the table, Joshua confidently introduced himself. He spoke about his past and present and the promising future. According to Joshua, meeting Denise restored his faith in real women who value genuine feelings. "As a decent man, I left a significant portion of my property to my ex-wife when we separated. We had lost almost all common ground. I have no obligation to pay alimony since our son is almost 20, but I help him as much as I can. Fortunately, I have a steady job, and in fact, I was at the origin of this firm and am one of the heads. Even though I currently rent a room in a hostel, I'm far from poor. In fact, I'm content with my life. If Denise agrees to marry me in the future, I will handle our housing situation like a real man should." Denise, who was serving a shrimp salad to her guest, shuddered and dropped a few pieces onto the tablecloth. The man didn't seem to notice and continued. "Unfortunately, the ring with its case was stolen from me, but I don't want to spoil this wonderful evening. I promise to present you, Denise, with the most beautiful ring I can find." Mary noticed her mother-in-law's embarrassment and couldn't understand how this seemingly wise woman could believe every word from Joshua. His tone was insincere, overly sweet, like a marshmallow dipped in honey and covered in powdered sugar. However, she might have been the only one who noticed, because she had overheard Joshua's plan to remove the pesky obstacles of Mary and Zack from his beloved's path earlier. Contrary to his actions near the trash cans, the guest was showering Denise, her son, and daughter-in-law with compliments at the table. "Zack, Denise has spoken so highly of you that I initially thought it was just a mother's exaggeration, but after meeting you, I confess my mistake. It's heartening to see how you care for your mother. Mary, you too are an admirable person. Your hard work commands genuine respect, and it's a joy to see how well you treat your mother-in-law." Feeling almost like the host, the man poured drinks and proposed a toast. "Zack and Mary, I wish your family happiness and prosperity. I've noticed how well you understand each other, and I wish Denise and I could share such harmony. Let's also toast to mutual understanding and hopefully a strong family friendship." Mary was taken aback by Joshua's hypocrisy. He could arguably win an award for his acting skills, but her intuition suggested he wasn't aiming for an acting accolade, but a more valuable prize, like the chance to move into a comfortable apartment and live happily. Denise smiled at her suitor, blinded to his hypocrisy. Perhaps it wasn't her fault. Even Zack, who was observing the guest intently, seemed to appreciate his sweet speeches. If Mary dared to suggest that Joshua wasn't sincere and was only interested in Denise's property, it could disrupt their peaceful relationship. There was only one way out of the stalemate: to sit quietly and to watch how events would develop. Meanwhile, Joshua went on with his offensive, and at the end of the evening, when the excited Denise and Mary served dessert, he asked for a moment's attention.
"Denise, will you marry me? Or do you need time to think?" he asked.
Denise put her hands to her flushed cheeks and nodded. Joshua quickly moved to her side, embraced her, and started kissing her, unperturbed by Zack and Mary's presence. Then he turned to Zack, his arms still around Denise's waist, and asked, "Will you bless your mother's happiness? It's crucial to me that you understand and accept this. Your mother deserves happiness, and I intend to provide it for her." Zack nodded. Mary, taken aback by this rapid turn of events, didn't dare to disrupt the tender moment by revealing that the sweet-voiced Joshua planned to build his happiness in Denise's territory after first removing his future wife's relatives from the apartment. From that evening, Mary's future mother-in-law's fiancé began to frequent his bride's apartment almost daily. On the next available working day, the mature lovers applied for marriage at the registry office and set a wedding date. Denise began to prepare the second wedding in her life. Meanwhile, Joshua took charge of arranging the restaurant, choosing a toastmaster, and other details, sparing his beloved from these concerns.
"My dear Denise, why burden yourself with all this? I'll choose the best options and present them to you for consideration. We'll go with whatever you prefer. Focus on your dress, jewellery, stylist, and whatever else you need."
As the wedding day approached, Denise was still undecided about her wedding dress. One day, she invited her daughter-in-law to join her in visiting boutiques and shoe stores. Mary was delighted and agreed. It was heartening to see Denise, who became more cheerful and even appeared rejuvenated as she tried on various dresses and suits. She enjoyed posing in front of the mirrors, although she was adamant about not wearing a veil or snow-white clothes, as she didn't want to make people laugh, in her own words. However, the experienced consultants in the stores were unfazed by this. It doesn't matter at what age happiness finds people. As a result, after many hours of trying on clothes, a beautiful dress in an incredibly refreshing shade of purple was selected for the mature bride. The dress was paired with marvellous shoes, with sturdy heels. However, Denise was slightly taken aback by the price of the outfit. Reacting quickly, Mary said with her card, saying, "Nothing is too much for a special day. Besides, the dress doesn't just fit you. It's as if it were tailored just for you. Plus, it's not just for the wedding. It's perfect for any festive event." Denise smiled sincerely. "Thank you, Mary, for helping me decide. I probably would have chosen a more budget-friendly option. Remember the light suit from the department, where the bright scarlet dress was displayed on the mannequin at the entrance. But then I would have regretted it. Now, let's find something interesting for you." Mary agreed, not because she needed a new outfit. She already had a well-cut dress, but she simply enjoyed the bonding experience with her mother-in-law during the outfit search. However, the more she conversed with Denise, the more she realized that Joshua's influence on her was far from positive. While taking a break at the cafe during their shopping centre marathon, Mary's mother-in-law refused to eat anything and instead sipped unsweetened green tea. This puzzled Mary, as Denise was known for her sweet tooth and usually ordered cheesecake or a milkshake whenever possible. Denise explained that she was trying to lose weight because Joshua preferred slim women, and she even considered surgery to reduce her stomach size for more effective weight loss. Mary was taken aback by this, knowing that Denise was terrified of surgical procedures. She even avoided getting a minor ingrown toenail procedure at the clinic, choosing instead to home-treat it for 2 weeks. This sudden revelation about considering surgery was both unexpected and concerning, especially since Denise's figure was near perfect and Joshua's behaviour seemed tactless and unfair. Seeing that the groom had taken too much power over his bride, Mary became anxious because if her mother-in-law was thinking about the operation, she would sooner or later support Joshua's idea of vacating the apartment. So it was impossible to postpone the conversation with her husband and confess to the overheard conversation, and she finally initiated a difficult conversation. "Listen, Zach, this Joshua strikes me as insincere. He says all the right things, but something feels off about him. Besides, he's pushing your mum to lose weight. And there's more." She then shared everything she had overheard near the trash cans and suggested, "Let's not wait for your mum to ask us to leave. It would be too awkward for her. Let's calculate our savings, make the first mortgage payment, and move into our own apartment. Even if it's not the house we dreamed of, but it will be our first place." Zach appeared troubled and stunned his wife with his own confession. "I gave about a half of our savings to Joshua this morning. He said he didn't have enough for the wedding. And he also wanted to buy my mum a travel trip and a car as a wedding present. He had money on bank deposit, but he didn't want to withdraw his funds from it in the end date and lose interest. He promised he'll pay it all back in a month, once his deposit matures." Mary tried to maintain her composure, even attempting to soothe her husband. "Well, there is a silver lining. We're not facing eviction anytime soon. When Joshua repays the money, we'll be back on track with the idea of our own apartment." Feeling guilty, Zach started to defend himself. "I'm sorry, Mary. I don't know how I got swayed by his arguments. He made it sound so logical. We're about to become family, and he promised to repay me with a small bonus. I was so captivated by the trip he planned to buy for my mum as a surprise honeymoon gift. I didn't even ask for a handwritten promissory note. Surely he isn't going to deceive me, is he?" Mary harboured some doubts, but chose not to voice them so as not to upset Zach even further. Instead, she tried to lift his spirits. "Don't worry. Joshua is marrying your mum in less than a week. We're not going to damage their relationship by demanding a promissory note now, are we? Let's focus on preparing for the party." Despite reassuring her husband, Mary was anxious. By her calculations, her husband had given Joshua about 30,000. However, there was nothing to be done about it. Mary took solace in the fact that she had no more secrets from Zach. Denise and Joshua's wedding was splendid. Joshua was touchingly attentive to his now official wife. All the guests were certain that this marriage would be strong and happy. Joshua dramatically knelt and presented his gift to his beloved, saying, "Denise, you are my goddess. I pondered how to thank you for agreeing to be my wife. After a few sleepless nights, I thought of it. I suggest we take a trip to the island where, according to legend, Aphrodite herself lived." The guests warmly applauded Joshua's romantic gesture and generous gift. However, Mary felt a twinge of resentment, knowing that the voyage was not financed by her new husband, but by the savings of her and her husband. Their first night as newlyweds was spent in a luxury hotel room, and then they returned to Denise's apartment. Zach and Mary prepared a breakfast of delicacies to welcome them, but Mary noticed Denise seemed unusually anxious. Finding a moment when their husbands were fixing a suddenly broken washing machine, she asked, "Denise, what's wrong? You seem lost in thought." "Oh, Mary," she replied, "late last night Joshua received a call from his business partner. Our peaceful honeymoon is likely over. we may have to cancel our trip. His partner can trust only Joshua to inspect a branch in Alaska. I was looking forward to a week of basking in the sun and swimming in warm waves. Crete has always been a dream of mine. It would have been a perfect holiday in the velvet season, but sadly, it's not meant to be." Mary attempted to comfort her mother-in-law. "There are times when we must adjust our plans. My mother always told me, everything that doesn't happen is for the best. That's how fate has ordained it. At least Tom won't miss you." Denise, holding the cat that had just strutted past the sofa, stroked her fluffy pet and agreed. "Exactly. At least Tom won't suffer. Although, to be honest, I don't think he cares who feeds him, provides water or cleans his litter box, as long as it's all done on time." The conversation shifted from the cancelled vacation to discussing the temperaments of cats in general, and Tom's temperament in particular. This was much more enjoyable than dwelling on something that couldn't be changed. When Joshua and Zack rejoined the women, Denise seemed to be in a better mood. After their breakfast, Joshua suggested, "If no one objects, I'll sleep here tonight. I still haven't chosen a suitable place for us to live together, especially since my room is paid for 2 months in advance. There's no reason to waste money on something extra." No one objected. Perhaps Zack felt a bit uncomfortable, thinking that his mother would be in the next room with Joshua, but he didn't voice his concern. Mary didn't feel she had any say in the matter. After all, since her mother-in-law was married, where else should her husband sleep but with his wife? The next day, Mary offered her co-workers her mother-in-law's Crete trip voucher. Holly jumped at the idea of a vacation on the island. "I still have an unused vacation. I think Mr. Rudolph will be able to sign a week for me. You girls will cover for me, won't you?" The colleagues agreed. Given there was no significant backlog at work, why not let someone enjoy a seaside vacation? However, when Mary tried to arrange the ticket sale with her mother-in-law, she was told to contact Joshua, as he held all the necessary information. Joshua disappointed both Mary and Holly, who was already looking forward to a pleasant trip. "Oh, Mary, I'm sorry, but I've already sold the tickets. My employee came to me after finding out I'm going on a business trip," he said. Joshua's business trip ended even sooner than expected. Upon his return, he moved into his wife's apartment without seeking anyone's approval. He brought with him not only his essential items, but also souvenirs from the north: Alaska bear claw salad and pasta server, woolen scarf, and magnets from the town visited. Despite Joshua's evident joy of being near his beloved Denise again, Mary, however, felt uncomfortable with the attention she was receiving from him. He was clearly interested in her, but he managed not to cross the line of decency. Sometimes Mary thought she might be imagining things, yet he was always looking at her. She was unsure how to respond to his gaze, and tried to limit their time together as much as possible. However, living in the same apartment made it impossible to avoid him completely. Joshua's unintentional touches, like when he took something from her hands, made Mary feel uneasy. One day he even slapped her lower back and suggested they shower together. Mary responded by slapping Joshua and locking herself in her room for the rest of the day, skipping dinner and claiming she wasn't feeling well. In the evening, when Zack brought his wife a cup of tea, she asked him to sit and began to tell. "Listen to me calmly and don't rush to retaliation. I don't want you to get into trouble, as this man seems to have connections with the police. I can't live here anymore. Joshua has become too forward, and it feels like he's observing me. Zack, I think he's trying to piss me off so I can get you to move out of the apartment." "Okay, he's won. I can't take it anymore. It's not only disgusting and immoral, but also unfair to your mother. She trusts Joshua, while he behaves inappropriately. Let's retrieve the money he took and leave. I don't want to cause a rift between your mother and me, but I know if I tell her the truth, it would lead to a conflict." Zack was taken aback. He couldn't believe such a scandal was taking place right under his nose. When morning came and only he and Joshua were left in the apartment, Zack decided to have a conversation with him. He started on a neutral note. "Listen, how's your bank deposit? Has it come to its end? I need my money." Joshua was not embarrassed. "Oh, here's the thing. When I was on a business trip, the contract was automatically extended and all accumulated interest was added to the principal deposit, as per the terms of a contract. I'm sorry to make you wait, but withdrawing the deposit now would mean a loss. If it's urgent, I'll borrow money from a friend tomorrow to repay you. It's embarrassing for me too." Joshua looked so remorseful that Zack felt guilty for asking for his money back. However, he still had another important issue to discuss. He asked directly, "Okay, I can wait a few more weeks for the debt. But why are you constantly looking at my wife? It's inappropriate. She is complaining about your harassment. What's that all about?" Joshua seemed shocked. "Zack, I hope you don't believe it. Mary is like a daughter to me, and she's married. A taboo. Moreover, she's your wife. How could I disrespect her like that?" Zack began to question Mary's truthfulness, as Joshua spoke too convincingly. But he still asked, "So you didn't touch her inappropriately?" Joshua was outraged. "Of course not. I didn't want to talk about it, but it's your wife who bothers me. I kept quiet to avoid upsetting you and Denise, but she's always around me. It's awkward. I've told Mary multiple times to behave appropriately, but she seems to provoke me deliberately. She probably wants to tarnish my image in Denise's eyes." Mary, who had returned home for her forgotten purse and inadvertently overheard a conversation not meant for her, stormed into the room. "Well, Joshua, repeat everything you just said with your vile tongue, but this time look me in the eye. Am I the one being dishonest? You rusty mushroom. Speak up, but don't overdo it. You're giving me a hard time, and you're making it look like it's the other way around. Aren't you ashamed of lying like this? You're a mature man, but instead of wisdom, you're filled with malice. You're a despicable person. Not even a person, but you slouching animal." Joshua wrinkled his nose. "Zack, where did you find such a country bumpkin? What kind of language is this? It's as if your Mary was raised in a tavern. Her parents must be uncivilized. They didn't teach her how to speak to elders." Mary was livid. "Don't you dare mention my parents. Why bring up my origins? That's irrelevant, because you truly are a despicable person. Clearly we're not having a constructive conversation, so we'll proceed legally. Now sit down and write a statement that you borrowed money from Zack on a specific date and that you'll repay it by New Year's Eve. My husband is an honourable man, and for some reason he trusted your word. Given your constant lies, this is the only way to deal with you, by documenting all agreements. Disgusting. Not a man at all." Joshua grinned. "By the way, I didn't borrow the money from you. I borrowed it from your husband. So you don't have the right to boss me around. I negotiated with him, not with you. Zack is a good man, and you need to keep quiet." Mary, feeling indignant, turned to her husband. "Zack, why are you silent? I'm being insulted, and you're taking his word over mine? You're risking our money. Tell him to sit down and write a promissory note. You can't trust his word." Joshua
continued smirking. "Listen to your wife, Zack. Let her boss you around, and you will turn into a henpecked." Shaken, Zack finally spoke up. Not to Joshua, but to his wife. "Mary, please calm down and go to work. We'll sort this out man to man. It's not your place to tell us what to do." Mary was on the verge of tears from frustration. How could her beloved Zack suddenly side with Joshua? She grabbed her purse and left the apartment, a place where she had been happy for many years. On her way to work, Mary managed to calm down slightly, but she was still upset by her husband's behaviour. Instead of defending me, Zack chose to side with the other man. How can I rely on him if he behaves so cowardly and irrationally in a critical situation? She wondered. Her colleagues noticed that Mary, who arrived a bit late, seemed upset. When asked, she shrugged it off and blamed it on resulting insomnia. Megan suggested sleeping pills, and Lucy offered the contact of a sleep specialist. Mary politely thanked her colleagues and noted the information, but her thoughts remained focused on her marriage. She wondered if it was worth maintaining the relationship, if her husband wouldn't trust her word. How could she prove Joshua was lying? How should she react in the future? Mary attempted to call Zack, but he seemed to be ignoring her calls. Assuming that he was just occupied, she tried to focus on her work and not let the thoughts about her mother-in-law's unpleasant husband distract her. That evening, Mary arrived home to an unwelcome surprise. All her belongings were packed into 2 suitcases in the hallway. Denise summoned her into the kitchen and demanded, "Give me your set of keys to my apartment. I won't tolerate such insolence in my home. Your lies have given Joshua a heart attack. Thankfully, Zack hadn't left for work yet and was able to take him to the clinic. Now, get out of my sight." Mary felt betrayed. She couldn't believe that no one trusted her. However, she was not ready to give up and asked, "Denise, listen to me. You probably heard a distorted version of our argument with Joshua. I want to tell you what really happened. Your husband borrowed money from Zack without giving a promissory note. That wasn't enough for him, though. To free up the apartment, Joshua manipulated Zack's opinion, which led to our argument. You believed his version of the story and packed my things. It's very hurtful. Your husband won't stop at getting me out of your apartment. Zack will be next. You're so blinded by love for Joshua that you can't see he's driving your closest ones away. You should be chasing him away, especially after he made you doubt your figure. Can't you see it? He's an invader, arrogant, unprincipled, initially flattering but ultimately toxic, poisoning the atmosphere." Denise, not tolerating the attacks on her beloved husband, pointed the daughter-in-law at the door. "Get out!" Mary placed her keys on the table, grabbed her suitcases, and headed to a hotel. Well, you never know how your day will unfold, she thought bitterly. Who could have predicted I'd be looking for a place to sleep tonight? Maybe it's my fault. I should have confronted that despicable Joshua after overhearing that conversation near the trash can. But who could have seen this coming? Distraught, Mary cried into her pillow before falling into a troubled sleep, without waiting for her husband's call. In her dreams, she saw distorted faces of her mother-in-law, her husband, who morphed into a goat with large horns and a beard, and the cheeky smile of Bob Jeffries, who teased her about her phone ringing and offered comfort. In one scene, Zack, as short as a preschooler, was begging Denise for candy. The dream's strange whirlwind of images only ended with the sound of the alarm clock.
Despite her personal feelings, the woman had to compose herself and proceed with her work, pretending as if her life hadn't been upended. She waited 2 days for a call from Zack. When her husband finally arranged a meeting, Mary had a sinking feeling, thinking, "This must be the end of my metropolitan fairy tale. Zack is probably going to ask for a divorce. Well, so be it." However, Zack didn't show up at the cafe alone. He was accompanied by a visibly nervous Denise. Zack apologized. "Mary, I apologize for doubting your judgment. It turns out Joshua was a con artist. Getting him to confess took some effort, but my friend managed to find powerful people who could persuade Joshua to tell the truth. He admitted everything. The attack was just a psychological ploy. By helping him, we subconsciously felt like we had invested in him, so he didn't seem like a stranger anymore. And the business trip he claimed to go on was a lie. The tickets were actually printed in a photo studio. Joshua returned some of the money, but it doesn't look like we can expect much more. My mum doesn't want to report to the police. She's ashamed that she contributed to this deception." Denise took her daughter-in-law's hands and pleaded. "Mary, my dear, come home. I promise no one will ever hurt you again. I made a mistake, and I hope you will forgive me. Please, come back." "Denise, I bear no ill will towards you. It's your right to decide who stays in your house. But I'm not a toy to be discarded and then reclaimed. I'm grateful this situation helped me see your true feelings towards me. Zack also showed me a side of him I never knew. You know, stay in your apartment. I think I'll file for divorce, work for 2 weeks, and go home. As I can see, the housing problem has spoiled everyone in the capital." Despite Zack's efforts to mend their relationship, Mary remained determined. Her parents were always there for her back in her hometown, and she was confident she could find a man who would trust her unconditionally.